All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this virtual public involvement meeting for the Madison Beltline Planning and Environment Linkages Study, or PEL for short. My name is Jeff Behrens. I'm the DOT project manager on the study. Joining me tonight from Strand Associates is Jeff Held. He is the consultant project manager. So for tonight's meeting, we'll start out by showing a video presentation that'll provide a general summary of the PEL study and the efforts that have been completed to date. We'll focus on the draft preferred strategy package, which is a combination of potential improvements throughout the corridor that we recommend being investigated in more detail in future National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA studies. Following the presentation, we'll then answer any general questions you may have, but before we get into that, there's a couple of things I'd like to go over first. All right, so for starters, this meeting is being recorded. Next, all participants will remain muted throughout the meeting, and the chat function has also been disabled. So if you have questions or comments, please submit them by emailing madisonbeltline@dot.wi.gov as shown on the screen. That email will continue to be shown during the presentation and after. And again, for those of you that are calling in on an audio-only line, the email to submit questions to is madisonbeltline dot.wi.gov. We'll plan to answer general questions about the study during the meeting or after the meeting. For specific questions like how does this alternative affect my property at this particular address, we won't plan to answer those on the air. However, we will follow up with you with an individual email afterwards. So thanks again for attending tonight, and we'll start now with a video presentation. Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Madison Beltline Planning and Environment Linkages Study, or PEL for short. The Wisconsin DOT is investigating potential long-term solutions to address existing and anticipated future transportation issues on the Beltline corridor. The following recorded presentation provides a general summary of the PEL efforts completed to date and discusses the next steps moving forward. The study investigated at U.S. Highway 14 or University Avenue in the city of Middleton and extend approximately 20 miles south and east to the County Highway N interchange in the town of Cottage Grove. The Beltline study corridor carries more than 130,000 vehicles per day and includes 18 interchanges. The goal of the Beltline PEL study was developed early on in the process through collaboration with agencies, municipalities, and other stakeholders. The Beltline PEL seeks to improve safety and multimodal travel along and across the Madison Beltline corridor in a way that supports economic development, acknowledges community plans, contributes positively to the area's quality of life, and limits adverse environmental and social effects to the extent practicable. With input from agencies, local municipalities, and stakeholders, 12 Beltline PEL objectives were also developed. These objectives focus on improving safety, mobility, and accessibility for all modes of travel on, across, or near the Beltline. Here's an overview of the PEL study process. The first steps involved outreach and engagement. This included coordination with agencies, municipalities, and stakeholders to develop the study goal and objectives, create screening criteria, and identify potential improvements for the Beltline. Using the feedback received, numerous improvement concepts were developed throughout the corridor for multiple transportation modes, including motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, and transit. These concepts are called components. After the public involvement meetings held in April 2022, the study team, again with input from agencies, municipalities, and stakeholders, worked to evaluate and prioritize the components that were developed and combine them into a range of potential long-term solutions called strategy packages. The strategy packages were presented at the June 2023 public involvement meetings. At this point, the study team has developed a draft preferred strategy package. The preferred strategy package is what the study team would propose to carry forward for more detailed analysis in the environmental study phase, or NEPA phase, which is the next step after the PEL study is complete. The next few slides provide an overview of the strategy package development process. Please note that the section of the Beltline east of the interstate was not included in the development of the strategy packages. Several corridor needs for this section were addressed as part of the U.S. Highway 12 and 18 and County Highway AP interchange project. And a U.S. Highway 12 freeway conversion study has identified some spot improvements that could be made farther to the east if the need arose. The first step was to develop the improvement components throughout the corridor. They fall into 5 main categories: mainline and interchange components. This category includes improvements such as adding travel lanes on the Beltline or improvements at interchange ramp intersections. Also included are improvements to weaving areas. Weaving areas are places where traffic entering the Beltline mixes with traffic wishing to exit at the next off-ramp. Roadway crossings and connection components. For example, constructing a new bridge over the Beltline. Pedestrian and bicycle components, such as constructing a new path to connect areas along or across the Beltline. Transit components, improving transit reliability along and across the Beltline. And finally, park and ride components, adding new park and ride lots near the Beltline. The components were then prioritized to determine how they would fit into the different strategy package options. The components were generally prioritized based on how well the component met the PEL study objectives, the feedback received during outreach efforts, the potential environmental and real estate impacts of the component, and how well the component improves accessibility to nearby jobs or destinations. Typically, the more times a component was considered a higher priority, the more times the component was included in one of the strategy packages. On the other hand, if a component was considered lower priority, most often it was included in fewer strategy packages, or it was possibly proposed for elimination within the PEL study. From there, several strategy packages were developed that combine individual components to meet the PEL study objectives throughout the corridor. They included different levels of improvement that range from a strategy package that keeps the Beltline as it is today, with only essential improvements and maintenance, labeled SP1 or the Preserve and Maintain package, to a strategy package that does everything needed to allow the Beltline to operate the best possible by offering the highest level of mobility and accessibility to all modes of travel, labeled SP4. Each of the strategy packages, other than SP1, the Preserve and Maintain, builds on the previous strategy package. Strategy package 2 includes only the higher priority components that were identified based on the screening criteria. Strategy package 3 builds on strategy package 2 by including the mid-priority components as well as the high priority components. Strategy package 4 includes all of the strategy package 3 components while also adding the remaining components that show promise. After presenting and getting feedback on the strategy packages at the previous public involvement meetings, as well as completing additional outreach and analysis, a draft preferred strategy package has been identified for the corridor. The draft preferred strategy package includes improvement components that the study team feels should be carried forward and evaluated in more detail during future NEPA studies, and isn't necessarily what would be proposed for future construction. Some components may change or be eliminated from further consideration during NEPA as the alternatives, impacts, and costs are developed in more detail and additional feedback is received. Two main factors guided the identification of the draft preferred strategy package. The first was the stakeholder feedback received during previous outreach efforts. The main themes that were heard include to focus on multimodal components. Adding additional mainline or general purpose lanes on the Beltline was generally not favored throughout the corridor, particularly in the area east of Verona Road where the flex lane is. However, an extension of the flex lane west of Verona Road was generally acceptable. And in general, people agreed with how the components were prioritized and placed into the strategy packages. The second factor was how well the packages addressed the PEL goal and objectives. As an example, adding additional general purpose lanes to the Beltline mainline was not something the majority of people supported. However, the addition of a general purpose lane in each direction between Verona Road and the interstate is anticipated to provide substantial operational benefits that will help address many of the PEL operational objectives. For that reason, it is proposed to be evaluated further. Strategy Package 4 was used as a basis for the preferred strategy package because it includes all of the viable components, but modifications were made from there based on the factors listed above. Now the components included in the draft preferred strategy package will be discussed, starting with the mainline travel lanes. The section of the Beltline west of Verona Road, shown by the yellow line, includes two possible options, either extending the existing flex lane or adding one general purpose lane in each direction. The section of the Beltline between Verona Road and the interstate also includes two possible options, either keeping the same number of mainline lanes or potentially adding one general purpose lane in each direction, shown by the dashed red lines. For the section of the Beltline between Stone Road and the interstate, the existing flex lane would be extended to the interstate, shown by the brown lines. The draft preferred strategy package includes weaving improvements at several locations that will be shown by yellow circles on the map. As mentioned previously, weaving areas are places where the traffic entering the Beltline mixes with traffic wishing to exit at the next off-ramp. These areas often have safety concerns and are where freeway operations frequently break down. Locations include both mainline directions between Oldsock Road and Mineral Point Road, between Whitney Way and Verona Road, between Fish Hatchery Road and Park Street, between John Mullen Drive and West Broadway, and between Monona Drive and Stoughton Road. The draft preferred strategy package proposes improvements at each interchange. Most locations are anticipated to be conventional expansion, such as adding turn lanes or through lanes at ramp intersections. These are shown with the darker blue circles on the map. Locations where more substantial changes are being considered are shown by the light blue circles. These locations include Gammon Road, Whitney Way, Verona Road, and Stoughton Road. The Stoughton Road interchange is currently being evaluated as part of a separate Wisconsin DOT study. Potential new roadway crossings included in the draft preferred strategy package would accommodate motor vehicles and bicycles and pedestrians. Locations will be shown by the brown arrows on the map and include west of Gammon Road, a crossing either east of Gammon Road or west of Whitney Way, shown by the dashed arrows, west of Park Street, and a crossing of US Highway 14 south of the Beltline. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodations proposed for more detailed evaluation will be shown in green. In addition to the accommodations that would be provided on the roadway crossings just described, additional locations include north of Old Sauk Road, south of Old Sauk Road, an extension of the West Town Path from Mineral Point Road to Gammon Road, a crossing of Whitney Way north of the Beltline, a connection from Whitney Way to the Southwest Commuter Path, a connection from Seminole Highway to the Cannonball Path, either north or south of the Beltline, shown by the dashed green arrows, a connection from West Broadway to the Upper Yahara Trail through the Capitol Springs Recreation Area, and a connection from Monona Drive to Stoughton Road and south to McFarland. Possible park and ride locations included in the draft preferred strategy package will be shown by purple circles. They include US Highway 14 or University Avenue at the Beltline, US Highway 151 or Verona Road at County Highway PD, Fish Hatchery Road at County Highway PD, and US Highway 14 at McCoy Road. A park and ride near Mineral Point Road and Junction Road was previously considered in the PEL study and is currently under construction as part of the East-West Bus Rapid Transit project. Finally, transit priority improvements are proposed at each interchange that currently has Metro Transit routes traveling through them. There are 9 total outlined by a purple hexagon, with the highest priority locations being where bus rapid transit service is anticipated to travel through the interchange. These are at Mineral Point Road and Fish Hatchery Road. One option for transit priority being investigated would allow buses to pass cars lined up at traffic signals at or near the Beltline and would allow buses easier access through the intersections to improve on-time service. This map shows the draft preferred strategy package in total. As mentioned previously, these are potential improvements that the study team feels warrant further investigation during future NEPA studies. It is not a preferred construction alternative. It is anticipated that changes to the preferred strategy package could be made during the NEPA process as the alternatives, impacts, and costs are reviewed in more detail and additional feedback is received. As part of the Beltline PEL study, the study team investigated how the corridor could be broken up into different sections for future NEPA analysis and eventual construction to most efficiently address Beltline needs when they are anticipated to occur. Factors that influence timing of the NEPA studies include safety, traffic operations, and infrastructure needs in each section. Please note that the Beltline needs may change over time, so the proposed sections and timing may need to be adjusted accordingly if new issues or needs arise. No construction related to the Beltline PEL study is planned at this time. Based on the analysis completed in the PEL, the Beltline is proposed to be separated into 3 logical sections for future NEPA studies. These include the section of the corridor west of Verona Road from University Avenue to Whitney Way, shown in blue, could be proposed to move into a NEPA study in the mid to late 2020s based on safety and operational needs. In the Verona Road area shown in green, the Wisconsin DOT is currently evaluating near-term options to help ease congestion at the Verona Road interchange due to rapid growth in the Verona area. Long-term, a NEPA study is warranted for the larger improvements identified in the PEL to fully address these issues. The timing of a long-term NEPA study will likely be dependent on whether the near-term options being investigated move forward and how effective they would be in addressing the congestion issues. But it is anticipated that a NEPA study for long-term improvements wouldn't begin until the 2030s. For the section of the corridor east of Verona Road, shown in orange, a NEPA analysis for long-term improvements corridor-wide is not expected to be needed for several years, likely sometime in the 2030s. The Beltline Flex Lane has addressed many operational issues, and the initial safety results are promising. Wisconsin DOT will continue to monitor the Flex Lane performance to see if these trends continue. It is possible that spot improvements may be needed in some areas before completing a corridor-wide NEPA analysis. Moving on to the next steps for the PEL study. The feedback received from these public meetings will help determine what changes, if any, should be made to the draft preferred strategy package. Those updates will be made over the next few months, and then the results of the Beltline PEL study will be documented in the draft PEL summary report, which is anticipated to be completed and published on the study website for public review and comment in the late summer or early fall. The final PEL summary report is anticipated to be completed later in fall of 2024. This will complete the Madison Beltline PEL study. Please consider providing feedback regarding the study and the draft preferred strategy package. Your input can help determine what the long-term improvements for the Beltline will be. There's an online comment form you can fill out and submit on the public involvement page of the study website. There's also an online draft preferred strategy package that will allow you to provide feedback as well. Scan the QR code on the slide to access the survey or click on the online survey link on the public involvement page of the study website. You may also contact Wisconsin DOT Project Manager Jeff Behrens with any questions or comments you may have. Please provide all comments on the draft preferred strategy package by June 30th, 2024 to make sure your feedback is included in the determination of the final preferred strategy package. As mentioned previously, there will be an opportunity to provide feedback on the draft PEL summary report in the late summer, early fall of this year. In addition, opportunities to provide feedback on the potential long-term improvements for the Beltline corridor will continue during future NEPA studies. Thank you for viewing this presentation. If you would like to review the public involvement meeting exhibits, including the draft preferred strategy package that was just presented, you can find them on the public involvement page of the study website. The Wisconsin DOT appreciates your interest in the Beltline PEL study and looks forward to gathering your input as the study process continues forward. Hello. All right. So at this point, we will plan to answer any questions that came in during the presentation. You can still submit questions. Just use that Madison Beltline at dot.wi.gov email that you see on the screen there. While we're getting the questions queued up here, I do want to point out that we do have an in-person meeting tomorrow from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County, 4619 Genoan Road in Fitchburg. At that meeting, we will have large exhibits for the study, and you can also talk directly with a staff member there. So if you're interested, I encourage you to show up to that. It will be the same information that we covered tonight, but again, we'll have the large exhibits there, and you will be able to talk directly with a staff member. Along those lines, I do want to also mention that the public meeting exhibits, the handout that we will be showing at tomorrow's meeting are currently up for review on the public involvement page of the study website. You can access that page using the link that's shown on the screen there, www.bit.ly/Beltline or you can scan the QR code that's on the screen as well. Links to the online comment form and the online draft preferred strategy package are also on that public involvement page of the study website.
All right. So with that, we do have a few questions that have come in. First one is from Nicholas Davies. Was a reduction of interchanges considered? It seems like it would be simpler / less expensive or less destructive than these weaving lanes. For example, the Seminole exit is redundant with Verona Road in Midvale, and the Rimrock exit is redundant with John Nolan Drive. So it's a very good question. We did look at some modifications to those interchanges, the access along the Beltline. It's always difficult to take access away, but and we did find, for instance, if you were to remove the Seminole Highway interchange, that traffic, there's a fair amount of traffic that uses it. It would be likely routed to the Verona Road interchange, and that increases the volume through that interchange as well. So at this time, the draft preferred strategy package does not include any changes to access. I think that could be looked at again in NEPA, but there are sort of some unintended consequences with that. And similarly with Rimrock, it is very close to John Nolan Drive. They kind of serve the same purpose. Yet Rimrock is typically the route that people take to get to the Alliant Energy Center, and that's how traffic is directed. So it's a good question. It has been considered at this time. It's not moving forward, but that's not to say that it wouldn't be, particularly that specific option could be explored during NEPA, I would say.
I guess I was just going to add that the two interchanges that you mentioned in your question are the two that we looked at. For those reasons, that it seems like those would be logical ones that you could look to remove. And to echo what Jeff said, this is something that could be looked at during a future NEPA study when we go through and look at those weave improvements in more detail, identify the specific impacts related to that, and then compare that against the impacts of removing one of those interchanges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a good question. Nicholas also asks, can you explain why options west of Verona Road don't include an option of neither a flex lane nor an additional lane? So I guess the short answer to that is that the next study, the NEPA study that follows, will certainly consider a preserve and maintain option. And so it will be considered as an option. And in addition, we mentioned how these strategy packages could still evolve in the next phase, in the NEPA phase. And so looking at the pros and cons of adding that, either extending the flex lane or adding a general purpose lane west of Verona Road, that is going to be reevaluated during NEPA. One thing that I will point out is that as far as the impacts go, it does look like for much of that corridor, the widening could happen to the inside. So the physical impact would not be that great. But there are obviously other impacts associated with adding capacity. So it's something that would be further investigated. It will be investigated in NEPA. That will be an option. And we'll look at that further.
Yeah, and I'd like just to add on to that, the reason that we were proposing either extending that flex lane or adding an additional lane is that DOT has operational goals that are desirable, that we look to strive for, and the traffic volumes out there cause us are kind of driving the need for potentially adding that, extending that flex lane or adding a general purpose lane. But again, when the NEPA studies start, we will get updated traffic numbers, and we'll take a look at things again and see if that is still needed to meet those operational goals. And as Jeff said, the preserve and maintain, which would be doing nothing beyond routine maintenance, that is always an option in all of our studies.
Yeah. Good. Next question is from Larry Hands. What is DOT doing to reduce VMT along the Beltline to reduce climate change impacts? How are you taking into account added greenhouse gas emissions due to any new construction on the Beltline? So it's a good question, and we get asked about things like induced demand and greenhouse gases, and it's something that it's difficult to quantify, and traditionally there's not been an accepted way from the federal government on how to do that. That is continuing to evolve, though, and larger studies, particularly environmental impact statements, are now sometimes being asked to quantify greenhouse gas impacts. And I know the interstate job from Madison to Wisconsin Dells is doing that. We've not done that with the Beltline so far, and it's something that may be required in the NEPA phase. I will say, though, that to some degree, the reason that our Beltline goals and our objectives, the PEL goals and objectives, are as multimodal as they are is really for that reason. to try and provide travelers options. And so I think that has carried through in our approach to the strategy packages. You can see that they're quite multimodal in nature. But there is still an option to be evaluated in NEPA of adding capacity as we've described. So I think we are trying to consider multiple options for addressing the Beltline needs. We have not quantified anything in terms of vehicle miles traveled or other impacts so far. That is something that may be asked of the department in the NEPA phase. Anything else on that one?
Again, just echo what you said. I think it's very likely that in future NEPA studies that there will be some form of greenhouse analysis done. I forget if it fairly recently, the Federal Highway Administration came out with information on how to conduct these type of analyses, and DOT, as Jeff said, has been incorporating it into newer studies. So when the NEPA studies start, definitely something that will be looked at in some form.
Steve Arnold asks, I think number 4, Steve Arnold asks, it seems that one of the objectives of the PEL study should be to protect the climate. Why is it buried in environmental impact? I think that's a fair question. I think that the goals and objectives were developed through quite a process with a lot of different stakeholders, including City of Fitchburg and others. And we kind of landed where we did, I think, largely with climate and environmental impacts in mind. I think that's why we ended up with, it's not just about mobility for automobiles. It's about multimodal improvements, and it's about improving accessibility as well, in addition to mobility. So I think that that's included in the setup of the study. There's also one of the objectives is to consider local plans and initiatives. And so that now includes a climate action plan from Dade County. And so that's sort of an ongoing, it's always a moving target. An ongoing goal of a study like this is to stay up to date with what the local plans say and to assess how potential changes to the Beltline would impact those plans, whether they align with those plans. So I guess that's kind of where I come out on that question.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to add to that other than, again, during future NEPA studies, we will be developing a purpose and need for those studies. And again, we're going to look at safety operations and impacts on the Beltline, and there's the potential for something more specific related to that as we go through that process. And there will be outreach related to that in those future NEPA studies as well.
Yeah. So the number 5 is from Cassie Steiner. What are the differences between strategy package 4 that was introduced last year and the preferred package you showed in the video today? So that's a good question. There's the preferred draft strategy package is quite similar to package 4. The differences are, let me see if I can, there's 3 main differences. For the roadway crossings and connections, there is an either or between Gammon Road and Whitney Way. I believe package 4 only showed a crossing west of Whitney Way. We received feedback, particularly from the neighborhood, that the crossing east of Gammon Road, which is, there's an existing bike underpass there, but the neighborhood preferred that location over the west of Whitney Way location. So that change was made so that it's an either or there. It's also an either or north or south of the Beltline for a bike ped connection, east-west. So parallel to the Beltline, either north or south between Seminole Highway and Fish Hatchery Road. We eliminated the Broadway connection. So there was a local road connection between Broadway and John Mullen Drive. That's been eliminated based on feedback. And east of the Beltline, or sorry, east of Verona Road, package 4 included a general purpose lane on the Beltline. So adding a lane to the Beltline, the draft preferred strategy package is an either or. It's a do nothing or an add a lane to the Beltline. So think that's the differences.
Those were the big differences between it. And again, with strategy package 4, it's what strategy package 4 contained all the viable components that we felt were the viable components throughout the study, and we used that as a basis for the draft strategy package. And again, these are the components that we feel should be evaluated in more detail during NEPA. It's not a preferred construction alternative by any means. It's just the ones that offer the most to address the Beltline goal and objectives. And we wanted to make sure that we were including those for more detailed analysis.
Yeah, we kind of erred towards keeping more stuff in than eliminating things down there. We did eliminate a lot of things over the course of the study, but when we got to those packages, we did err on the side, especially since there was a lot. Package 4 had a higher amount of alternate mode improvements, and so most of that is included in the preferred strategy package. Let's see, where were we? Number 6, right? So Nicholas Davies asks, for the bike ped projects, who would those be paid for or built by WSDOT? Would the state have more options for acquiring right of way? Some of these have popped up in the city of Madison plans for years, and it's been a challenge for the city to get the land and to get them built. So that's a very good question. And I think that it's hard to know until these projects come along. The department, has included these in the draft preferred strategy package because they're important to the long-term vision of the Beltline. The city of Madison is actually, we just saw a public meeting notice for a portion of one of these components that the city's going to build, and that's from High Point Road. There's an existing underpass at the Beltline of High Point Road that doesn't go anywhere today. That's going to be extended east and hook up with a court about halfway between High Point and Gammon. So the city has been finding ways to get these constructed. The department will look to aid in that as projects become a reality. But there is the reality of funding challenges. There are things that the department can and can't do, and that definitely factors into these improvements.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jeff. I think that there will be, if and when something would get constructed, there would be some dollars allocated for construction of some of the bike ped accommodations. How much and what a cost share would be between the city, that would get determined further on in the process. Related to your question about acquiring right of way, you're referring to, I forget the law, if it's 32.012, or I know it better as Act 59, where DOT and other municipalities can't condemn property for bicycle improvements such as bike lanes or shared use paths. Unfortunately, that law is still on the books. Hopefully by the time anything gets constructed out here, it wouldn't be, but it's a challenge that we would need to work through if it was there. And, for what we're proposing with the PEL study, as Jeff said, it's the long-term vision that we have for the Beltline, or that we want to investigate further for the Beltline. So we want to make sure that we're including these types of things and make sure that we're putting that forward. That being said, it may be difficult to implement some of them depending on the need to acquire right away and have willing property sellers, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be a little bit case by case as it comes. There definitely, there is more federal funding available. There's some new, there's new programs, and I know City of Madison's done a really nice job of taking advantage of those and getting some of these types of things built. City received funding for the Perry Street overpass, which is it's the roadway crossing and connection that we showed west of Park Street. And so, that's hopefully going to be coming along. The city's going to be looking to get that designed and constructed. So I think it helps to have these things in a plan like the PEL. so that it's not just WSDOT, but it's the city, it's the MPO, it's the other local communities. Hopefully everybody can work together and get some of these things accomplished, and it may not happen in one big job. It might happen as opportunities arise. Very good. From Susan Gatert, are you accounting for induced traffic or induced demand in the study? If so, what strategies are you looking at to mitigate that? So it's a good question. It's somewhat difficult also to quantify that, although there are methodologies out there. We have been using travel demand modeling to assess the impact on not only motor vehicle travel, but also how different modes are used with these different strategy packages. I know that with the flex lane, there has been an increase in traffic volumes. We were talking about this a little bit before the meeting, and the department has been monitoring that. And it does appear that some of the parallel routes that people were using previously to avoid the Beltline, people are now using the Beltline again. So a good example is Broadway between Monona Drive and the Beltline. There were a lot of folks that were avoiding the Ohio River Bridge prior to the flex lane, and it looks like that is that's happening less now. The volumes have gone down on Broadway. And that's really an example of what's called latent demand, which is a little different than induced demand. Induced demand tends to refer to people choosing to live or work different places because increased mobility, able to get places more easily. That's a little more difficult to predict and to quantify. But we've used the tools that are available to us at this phase of the study. This is another topic that we'll have to see where the state of the practice is when the NEPA studies come along. It's something that I think we could expect would be discussed and would be quantified if possible in the NEPA study in the next phase.
I think we did a high level indirect and cumulative impacts analysis, which during the PEL, a more detailed one would be done during future NEPA studies, but basically getting planning experts from various municipalities, bringing them in. We went through the different strategy packages and asked questions like, do you think this strategy package is going to increase development or increase the rate of development versus this other strategy package? So we got some feedback on that from those local experts on what they felt new development or rate of development would occur from each strategy package. And then again, during NEPA, I think that would be done in more detail with a specific improvement that the DOT would look to pick as a preferred alternative for construction for the corridor.
Yeah. Steve Arnold asks, will the prohibition of eminent domain for bike and ped projects in 2017 prevent some of these projects? So that is a similar question to what we had before. It's definitely a challenge in certain aspects, although as you point out in your question, and Jeff noticed, it's really just for eminent domain or sort of the condemnation, quote unquote. If you have willing sellers, the department is still able to purchase right of way for bike and pedestrian ways. That's another technicality, is the phrasing of the actual language is for bike and pedestrian ways, and how that's defined is a little bit for debate. But I think, Steve, that's a good question, and it is a challenge. And hopefully, we mentioned there's other funding sources out there, the TAP funding, transportation alternatives, and that sort of thing. So hopefully, at least having these in the plan will help make them more likely to become a reality, frankly, that everyone understands that they're part of the long-term vision. But I think we kind of covered that one already. Okay, so we do have another one in from Nicholas. If we're talking about adding a lane so soon after adding the flex lane, doesn't that demonstrate that adding lanes isn't a future-proof strategy for addressing driver expectations? Yeah, I think you have to remember that our study horizon year is 2050. And so The flex lane really is intended to be an interim solution. And it could turn out that that additional mainline capacity is not needed. And that will depend on, Jeff mentioned, when NEPA begins. And for that eastern portion of the Beltline, that's probably a few years away yet. We'll have to take a new look at kind of where things are at. We'll create a new purpose and need. We'll have more recent information on population growth, how the flex lane is performing. And so, there will be a fresh look at whether additional capacity is worth the dollars and the impacts associated with it in the next phase. So it's not so much that the flex lane isn't getting the life out of it that the department expected. It's always been anticipated that it'd be about 10 to 15 year fix. That's kind of right in line with the horizon year that we're looking at. In fact, we're looking a little further out than that.
Yeah, I think just related to that, Jeff, you mentioned when the flex lane was built, it was a 10 to 15 year fix for those congestion issues on the Beltline. One of the things that was in the presentation was for that area east of Verona Road. One of the things we would look to do is continue to monitor the flex lane. The initial safety results have been very good, and the as well as travel time reliability on the Beltline in that section as well. So we're going to continue to monitor that. There may be some spot improvements that we need to look at in the interim, but in the presentation we talked that probably a future NEPA study for that particular area for long-term improvements corridor wide wouldn't be until the 2030s. And again, that would match up with the predicted lifetime or when the flex lane was predicted the useful life of that. Mm-hmm. So it would likely be a ways out, and we'll continue to monitor the flex lane. Mm-hmm.
And a lot can change, and I remember a few years back, connected and automated vehicles, there was this real momentum, and it felt like driverless, or I should say self-driving cars would be upon us, and every automaker was working on them, and there's been a lot of advancement in that, but it definitely has slowed down a little bit. So my point being simply that things are always changing. Technology is changing. People's choice for how and where to live and how to travel is always changing. So I think it's important to recognize that we have our goals and objectives for this PEL study, but that will be reevaluated when the next phase begins. Hopefully this PEL study lays out a vision that's worth continuing to investigate, and that's what we're proposing here. But everything will be kind of reassessed at the time of it will be reassessed when NEPA begins. I'm not seeing any other questions yet. I do hear some typing over there yet, so you guys are still, we're kind of getting the questions forwarded to us as they're coming in. But we'll pause here, we'll wait and see if some additional questions come in. We'll probably give it 5 minutes, 8 minutes. Another one coming in now. So just, keep them coming, folks. The meeting is from 5 to 6:30, so we've got plenty of time. So Nicholas asks, has there been any data collected on speeding in the flex lane? I've heard a common impression that it's really enabled and encouraged dangerous behavior. So I think that's something the department, gets, hears from the public. I know that there has been an increased enforcement effort, and I know personally I've seen police officers out there much more often. I don't really remember ever seeing them out there on the Beltline in years past, but
Nicholas, I don't have a number on that. That would be something that I could follow up with our traffic section and get you. I've heard the same things. I don't drive in the flex lane because people there do seem to be driving very fast. But that being said, our traffic section here at the Southwest region has been coordinating with law enforcement to increase patrols for the Beltline. It's something that they have been working on since the flex lane opened, even, well, before that even. But have been looking to step up patrols of the Beltline in order to hopefully curb some of that speeding and dangerous driving.
Yeah. I know, maybe you mentioned it, Jeff, but we were just talking again about this before the meeting, and over the first year of operation for the flex lane, which was July of 22 to July of 23, crashes were down 25% overall. So that's a good thing, but I know we definitely heard, and just anecdotally and having driven it myself, that speeds are an issue out there. And I know on the east end, particularly, as people get kind of closer to the interstate or have just come off the interstate, speeds tend to be higher on that east end out towards Stoughton Road and in that area. So it is something I think the department has heard and has listened to and is trying to make some improvements on. So, okay, well, we'll pause there a moment and let people type the questions as they come to you. And like I said, we'll stay until the questions are through. We'll wait 5 or 8 minutes or so, and if we hear nothing, then we may end the meeting, but I'm happy to stay tuned here for a few minutes. it looks like we got a few people still on the line. We'll hang on for about 5 more minutes. If another question comes to you, please send it to the email address. Otherwise, we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes if we don't get any more questions.
All right, well, we haven't received any additional questions, so we are going to end this virtual public involvement meeting. I want to thank everyone that took the time to attend and those that sent us questions. As a reminder, we do have an in-person public involvement meeting tomorrow night from 5 to 6:30 at the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County, 4619 Genowin Road in Fitchburg. All the public involvement meeting materials are on the public involvement page of the Beltline study website. So I encourage you to go online, take a look at those. Please fill out a comment form and a survey. Your feedback does matter, and we're looking forward to getting it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.